Hello viewers, Purple Celery here. Welcome back to my channel. I've got my eye on you and no doubt you have your eye on me. So join me as I review episode 8 of series 11 of Doctor Who, The Witchfinders. My overall impression of The Witchfinders was that it was quite a silly episode. There were some real bonkers moments in this episode. We had the very camp and flamboyant King James I, the actor really chewing the scenery. We had the granny who turned into a mud monster. We had the weird tentacle thing at the end. Yeah, overall it was quite a daft episode. But having said that, I also felt that this episode did feel quite authentic in some ways, which I'll get into in just a sec, and it also dealt with some rather serious themes. So the main thing that I felt this episode actually did address in quite an authentic manner is the role of women back in the early 1600s. So for the first time in this series, we've really seen the Doctor face some very real limitations because she's a woman. For example, we had King James just dismiss her as a silly chatterbox. He basically pigeonholed her as the Witchfinder's assistant and automatically assumed that Graham was the chief of the Witchfinders group. I think the Doctor's quote about, "Oh, if I was a bloke, I wouldn't have to waste all this time defending myself. I could just get on with the job." That rang very true. So it was good to see that this episode didn't rug sweep the whole issue of the Doctor being a woman. It really did address the very real limitations that a woman would have no doubt faced in those days. Another thing about this episode that I thought rang true was the portrayal of King James, and obviously not the hammy camp way that he was portrayed. But the fact that he was dealing with some very serious abandonment issues. Granted, I don't know much about the real King James. All I know really is that he was responsible for authorising the Bible that was named after him, and the fact that he was the son of Mary, Queen of Scots, who was beheaded by her cousin Queen Elizabeth. Well, not personally, but her execution was ordered by Queen Elizabeth I. So long story short, I thought that the conversation with the Doctor and the King when she was tied up rang quite true, in that he clearly did have some really serious issues that arose from his past. Another theme that this episode explored, which I thought was quite dark, was the whole issue of bullying and standing up to the people who are persecuting you and facing your fears. And it's good that we got to know a bit more about Yaz in this episode when she told Willa and the Doctor the story about how she spent a year in metaphoric hell with this horrible girl called Izzy Flint, who gave her a horrible time. And there are parallels with that and the nastiness that Becca Savage was inflicting on her I'm not sure what you call them, peasants, villagers, folks, whatever, because she was pretty much like as nasty as a bully could get, basically murdering people just because she thought she was saving her own soul. Another thing that I liked about this episode was that finally we see the Doctor show some real passion, some real anger almost. And again, this was during the scene where she was tied up, having that conversation with King James. I really liked her speech to him about looking inside people's hearts if he really wants to understand the world, and not pigeonholing people as either witches and villains and heroes. About trying to be a better person, about using his head and doing the decent thing. And I saw a flicker of real anger there from Jodie's Doctor. I also liked how in the beginning it was mentioned that the Doctor and the TARDIS team were back in time because they were trying to see the coronation of Queen Elizabeth I. I thought that was a nice link to the 10th Doctor, who had that fling with Queen Elizabeth I. And I did wonder if perhaps the 13th Doctor had chosen this moment in time to come back to, because she was hoping to get a glimpse of, you know, her old flame. Who knows? There were a few things about this episode that did make me go, really? The first is that the Doctor gives this lecture to the companions about how they have to be careful not to change the course of history, and we've kind of seen that also like in the other historicals like Rosa and Demons of the Punjab. So the Doctor gives them this lecture, and then what does she do? She dives into the pond to try and save Granny. I suppose you could argue that perhaps Granny's death was not a fixed point in time, and theoretically it was still open to the Doctor to save her, whereas the whole thing with like Rosa Parks, for example, not giving up her seat on the bus was a fixed point in time and hence couldn't be changed. Or else maybe it was the case that like Granny was going to die anyway, and even though the Doctor tried to save her, she still died, and hence time wasn't altered or anything. Another thing that also made me wonder a bit was what was happening in the days and weeks before Granny was killed. We saw Granny be buried and Willa say the prayer over her, and then the Morlacks tried to inhabit Granny's body, and she got up and started walking around. But there were something like 36 previous women who were also killed. So what was going on with them and the Morlacks? I mean, were their bodies inhabited by the Morlacks also leading up to that? It just felt like it was only once the Doctor arrived that things really took off and the dead rose and that. And it just seemed a little bit, I don't know, a little bit of a coincidence to me. It would have worked better if there'd been some mention of, you know, people seeing the dead rise in the weeks and days before the Doctor turned up. And also, just out of curiosity, I did wonder what would happen if the Doctor had actually drowned. Would she have just regenerated? Like, I think in some ways it would have been cool to have seen her be dunked as like a woman, as like the 13th Doctor, and then when they pulled up the log again, she had regenerated into like the 14th Doctor, and she was like completely different, like, you know, a man once again or something. Obviously, you know, that was never going to happen, but it would have been an interesting hypothetical. So as I've said, this was quite a silly episode. It was quite cheesy in some parts. Having said that, I also think it was by far not the worst Doctor episode, not the worst Doctor Who episode that I have ever seen. It was okay. It was fun to watch. I'd probably give this one like a standard 7 out of 10. But, you know, I'm happy as always to hear your comments. You know, which Doctor Who episode is your worst or least favourite? If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see everybody next week when we look at episode 9 of series 11. Until then, this is Purple Celery, over and out. See you then.